Hare Krishna. Question from Subudhi Madha Prabhu. Is varnashram necessary for a practitioner of Krishna consciousness? Answer: no, it's not necessary. Srila Prabhupada has clearly talked about varnashram as a later or unfinished part of his mission, but then he also told us that whatever is needed for us for going back to Godhead is very much there within what he has given us and within the broad legacy of the Gaudiya Vaishnava movement. So, varnashram is not necessary for a devotee. Varnashram is a material system of organization and it is conducive for the practice of spiritual life, but bhakti is ahaituki apratihata. It is unmotivated, uninterrupted, and that means that it does not depend on any material circumstances. So, devotee can may not be as a part of varnashram, but still the devotee can practice bhakti and can attain Krishna's abode by the practice of bhakti by the steady practice of bhakti. So a supportive social system such as varnashram can be helpful, but it is by no means essential or indispensable. Bhakti itself is self-sufficient for purifying a devotee and elevating the devotee to the highest level of prema, pure love of God. Can varnashram be established in cities also, or is it only for villages? And can you explain the Vedic, Daivi and Asuri varnashram systematically? Answer: yes, varnashram is not dependent on the nature of the living in the time when the varnashram was there also. If you look at the Ramayana, the Mahabharata, Bhagavatam, that time also there is clear description that there were cities and there were villages. There were small towns which were in between. So Dwarka, Mathura, and during Krishna's time these were big cities. And when they were going along, there were small villages also along the way from one place to another. So when varnashram was present, at that time also there were cities, and that time there were villages also. And if we see the so striking contrast, the way Krishna lived in Vrindavan and the way he lived in Mathura, there's a clear difference between rural living and urban living. So there was varnashram is possible in both cities and in villages. It is a system of socio-cultural organization that can pervade the whole human society. So now can you explain the different kinds of varnashram? Okay, this is a complex subject, but if we look at now before that, can varnashram be established in cities or in villages? Yes, how exactly varnashram is to be established where, that is something which is still under a matter of discussion, and we'll focus on first understanding. So if we look at Srila Prabhupada's teachings, if we look at the teachings of the previous acharyas, Bhakti Rasamrit Sindhu, Rupa Goswami does not make any mention of varnashram among the 64 elements of bhakti. And Bhaktivinoda Thakur is the first acharya who talks about varnashram, first Gaudiya Vaishnava acharya, who talks about varnashram in his writings. And he talks about what he calls as Vaigyanik varnashrama. Vaigyanik is what we call scientific, and that he also refers to as Daivi varnashram. And beyond that, he also talks about then Prabhupada is also talking about different things. So his statements we can understand at 4 different levels. We could say there is natural varnashram. Natural varnashram means basically where the 4 varnas are 4 innate human types. That means there are different people who have different dispositions. There are some people who are intellectual, some are administrators, some are of a mercantile nature, and some are general assistants. So this is a broad social division which is present in every society. Every society, wherever we go in this world, there are some people who are intellectuals. Some people are like so. This is a natural varnashram, we could say, in terms of that naturally when people are born and people grow up, people have these broad 4 divisions. So we could call this as natural varnashram, and the varnas are definitely not caste, they are broadly like human types. So natural varnashram, or we could call it, so these are basically in that sense 4 divisions. So Prabhupada at one time he said that I have come here to the west to look for brahmanas. That is with respect to the, so when he's looking for brahmanas means now how are brahmanas to be found in America. He's not talking about brahmanas as they are understood in the uh, conception in India. He's talking about people who are intellectuals, who think about higher things in life, with an intellectual framework. So now that's natural. It's in terms of nature, humans are divided into these four broad types. Then beyond that, is there anything else? There is varnashram in terms of the, we could say, as it exists in today's world, in India especially, that is what is called as Asuri Varnashram. Okay, before that we can talk about Vedic Varnashram. Vedic Varnashram was the division of society into 4 broad castes. So it is where the natural human types, it's recognized that people are of different divisions and then they are trained accordingly. Today now if somebody is an intellectual, there is no social system of training the person to become an intellectual. People have to rely on their own skills and then find out them, make the appropriate contacts, get into the appropriate systems, and then they may become trained as intellectuals. And same with becoming administrators or becoming business people, whatever. So the point is that the Vedic Varnashram focused on recognizing people's basic types and arranging the social structures in such a way that they could be trained according to their human types. Now, there is a whole broad philosophy underlying this, where it is understood that the people are, that say if a that their souls go from one generation to another, that souls are attracted to a particular couple when the couple unite according to the level of consciousness. So a brahmana and a brahmani, when they unite, then a brahminical soul is attracted into the womb, and a brahminical child is born. So the Vedic Varnashram was, in this sense, there was there was a large amount of correlation between the social vocation and the genealogical continuation. So that means Brahmanas' children would become Brahmanas. So Kshatriya's children would become Kshatriyas. That was expected of them, and that's what generally they would do. But it is recognized that not all Brahmanas' children will automatically be Brahmanas. That's why there is the concept of Brahma Bandhu. Those who are born in Brahmanas and they are relatives of Brahmanas, but they are themselves not Brahmanas. So it is understood that one has to become trained and one has to develop qualities. Only when one has developed qualities, then one can be called as a Brahmana. Otherwise, one is a Brahma Bandhu. One is not a Brahmana. So the Vedic Varnashram was where there was a social structure which enabled people to to go along with their natures and get trained and develop make social contributions according to social structure. So now over time, this social division, which was largely according to birth, but it was not defined by birth. It was defined by qualities, and to some extent, a person who was a Brahmana, born in the Brahmana family, that person, if it was a soul with Brahminical disposition and then got a Brahminical upbringing, then there's a fairly good likelihood that the Brahmana's child would become a Brahmana. But it was not necessary. The Asuri Varnashram, which is what pervades society today in India, that is the presumption. So rather than seeing Varna as a human type, uh, Varna became a racial designation. So Varna is a human type, not a not a genealogical designation, not racial, genealogical designation. Genealogical designation means that okay, if somebody is born in a particular family, then that person automatically is meant to be a Brahmana. And this division led to the self-arrogation of caste privileges by higher castes and the exploitation of the lower caste, and there was huge protest. There was terrible, regrettable amounts of discrimination that happened because of this, and there was a rejection of all this eventually. And there is a rebellion, and so the Asuri Varnashram is one of the defining conceptions of Asuras is one thing that one is the body, and the bodily reality is the defining reality. It is the ultimate reality. So the Brahmanas started thinking that because we are Brahmana in the Brahminical family, that's why we are the highest among all the Varnas, and we are meant to be be respected, and we are meant to be practically like the lords of others. And the Shudras, they were looked down upon and they were exploited, and this happened. Now, of course, this did not happen everywhere in the world. It happened everywhere in India also. In some parts it happened, but there was this discrimination that was there. So this is a demoniac system of varnashram, that means where birthright made it wrong. So birth itself does not make everything right. One has to develop the right qualities. But when birthright was claimed by the higher castes as a right for getting the membership of a elite group, that led to the Asuri Varnashram, and that led to exploitation. That is definitely rejected by the acharyas, by the within the Vedic conclusive understanding of Vaishnavism. Now beyond that there is natural Varnashram, there is Vedic Varnashram, there is presently Asuri Varnashram, and then there is Daivi Varnashram. So now the recreating the whole social structure of Varnashram today is quite difficult. But Daivi Varnashram means we accept the social division, but we don't accept the underlying philosophy. We focus on the principle that, so in the Vedic Varnashram, the idea was a Shudra by doing punya will come from the, say, Shudra level to the a Shudra by living as a Shudra, by doing the duties of Shudra, will in the future life be born as a Vaishya, and then a Vaishya will be born as a Kshatriya, Kshatriya will be born as a Brahmana, and eventually one will attain Swarga and one will move on towards liberation gradually. So it is considered a very slow multiple lifetime progression through the strict adherence to one's caste duties. But Bhakti universalized the access to transcendence, and therefore the Bhakti philosophy and the Bhakti practices were open for everyone. So in Daivi Varnashram, this is what is hinted at in Bhagavatam, and it says that Atah Pumbirjasveshta Varnashrama Bhagashaha Svanushtita Dharmasya Samsiddhir Haritoshanam. That the purpose of the Varnashrama Vibhaga, the division into Varnashram, is Samsiddhir Haritoshanam. It is satisfaction of Lord Hari. So now, if we move onwards and consider further what is happening here, the important point is that within the today's social structure, when there is no supportive social structure, people find spiritual life very difficult to practice. So Srila Prabhupada felt that a supportive social structure will be helpful for people to practice bhakti. So initially Prabhupada's idea was that if you look at the 1960s lectures, he is saying that there is no need for Varnashram. That system has more or less collapsed and we can just practice bhakti and transcend. But then we move on where Prabhupada says that Varnashram is needed for the people in general, otherwise people will be chaotic. Then Prabhupada later says that, oh, Varnashram is needed for you devotees also. Only then there will be a gradual system or by which one can, supportive system by which one can progress. So we could say that the practice of bhakti is like walking on a tightrope, and Varnashram, the culture, is like a safety net below. So now Varnashram itself, how it is to be established, Srila Prabhupada talked in terms of the goals. He did not talk in terms of the practical processes. So for example, he said, okay, Brahmana should be trained in such a way that they will develop these qualities. Kshatriya should be trained in such a way that they will develop these qualities. So now what is the specific training that is required? That is something which is still being discussed. So the essential principle of Varnashram is what? It is not so much of division into 4 levels. It is more of arrangement of society in a way that can enable people to keep moving towards God, to do their material work in a way that is harmonious with their spiritual purpose. So within varnashram, people who are of intellectual disposition, they need to be intellectual. That's what their disposition is. But they can be, while being intellectual, instead of trying to talk about, instead of using their intellect in various kinds of speculation, various kinds of contemplations, speculations, one uses one's intellect to study scripture, understand scripture, and to study broadly subjects connected with higher spiritual themes. So similarly, one has to earn a living by, say, as a kshatriya. One is a kshatriya, but one does it as a god conscious ruler. So the idea of varnashram is to focus, to provide a conducive social environment where people can practice bhakti. So where at least the pursuit of one's material living does livelihood does not militate against one's spiritual practices. Today the world is largely materialistic, and because of that, often for devotees it is difficult to practice spiritual life, and often the professional environment is not only apathetic but it is antipathetic towards one's spiritual practices. So if different devotees can come, if devotees can come together and form a group, a cohesive group that enables them to uh, mm, to in a devotional environment earn their living, that itself could be a model of varnashram today. So for example, if devotees come together, if they say there are many devotees, several devotees or doctors, they come together and make a hospital which is on devotional principles, then that could be a working model of varnashram. If say parents come together and make a school where in addition to where spiritual subjects and spiritual values are also taught along with whatever is the curriculum that is in that particular country, that could also be some kind of some level of approximation of varnashram. So can varnashram be practiced in cities? Yes, of course, at that level it can be practiced in city. That means trying to take care of the material needs of devotees within a spiritual setting, in a way that is conducive to one's spiritual life. That is the essence of varnashram. So whether people in various parts of the world can be divided into four divisions, and who will fall in which division, and on what basis will that be decided, who will decide that, these are all questions for which there are no easy answers. So varnashram should not be treated like a magic wand which will solve all problems. We need to know that the only pure love for Krishna can solve all the problems, and varnashram can act as a supportive social system. So wherever it is possible, some of the spiritual leaders within our movement are also working on trying to establish some models of varnashram. But the essential principle is that to have a material environment that is conducive for one's spiritual practice, and how that will work out for different people in different time, place, circumstance, that will vary. And that is where the resourcefulness of the individual devotee seekers, as well as the wisdom of the devotees guides, all this comes into the picture. And that's why the varnashram is very much is going to be a part of the living tradition of our movement, of how that is the tradition that is translated and made relevant and beneficial for the living practitioners of the tradition. That is something which will gradually emerge. So eco-friendly farm communities where devotees live in a way that is natural in terms of earning through nature, and in a way that is also helpful for moving towards, which also helps to want to move towards the practice of bhakti. That is considered one way in which varnashram can be implemented. But overall, varnashram is very much something under discussion about how it can be implemented, and depending on different time, place, circumstances, there will be different modes of implementation of the principle of making one's material life harmonious with one's spiritual life, which is the underlies principle of varnashram as it is for a devotee sadhaka. Thank you. Hare Krishna.